Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this month's Ceolytics webinar. I am Medhavi Singla, Community Manager from Ceolytics. So before we start on with the webinar, I would like to share a brief updates about the upcoming Credit Union Analytics Summit. We have added new and interesting sessions for this year. This time we will be having a special roundtable session on innovation and digital transformation that will help you navigate fintech landscape. This invitation-only roundtable will be hosted by international speaker Scarlett Sieber along with Naveen Jain, founder Ceolytics. We have also added sessions for hands-on workshops on topic like how to transform your marketing to maximize your digital growth potential by James Robert Lee from Prisma Campaigns, and creating a culture of change and execution by Rich Jones from Leading to Leadership will help you take your credit union onto the next level of decision making. This year, we also have FinTech pitch sessions at the summit. These sessions will allow FinTech startups to pitch their products in front of the CEO leaders. You can know the key trends of the FinTech space directly from these startups that will help you take smart decisions while choosing a product. We have Prisma Campaigns and Loan Street as the first two finalists for this session. We also have Big Data Analytics Challenge that lets you share your unique story around data analytics with your credit union peers. While we are open for new submissions, we have Richard Hayden from Virginia Credit Union, Joe Agostinelli from Vibrant Credit Union, and Mark Baumgartner from Washington State's employees already aligned as the finalists. Overall, this is going to be the best and awesome Credit Union Analytics Summit till date, and we are really excited and looking forward to it. So now with this, I would like to introduce you to Karan Bhalla from CEO Rise and Austin Wensloff from On Approach, who will be our speakers for today's session, and they will be sharing their thoughts on visualization and how it can help your credit union explore more in the world of data. We have kept all the attendees on mute so that there are no background noise. You can send me your questions via the chat window, which will be discussed at the end of the webinar. The webinar recording will be up on the Ceolytics website, so you can go through it later on. Thank you, and let's start with the webinar.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining. I know visualization is something that a lot of credit unions are working on and are excited about and budgeting for, and especially around now, planning for 2019. So hopefully this is a timely time to talk about this. I do apologize ahead of time. I have a slight raspy throat today, but fortunately, Austin's on the line too. So if I can't speak to anything, there's nobody better than Austin to jump in there. So Austin, do you want to do just a quick introduction yourself?
Sure, yeah, thanks, Karan. This is Austin Wensloff. I am the Vice President of Business Development at On Approach. So been with On Approach, the QSO, for about 5 years now. So I'll let Karan start us off here, and I'll jump in at a few key spots as well to add some stuff.
Yeah, and this is Karan, CEO of CEO Rise Analytics. We are a QSO built to bring data science and advanced technologies really to credit unions. And it's interesting, as we've started this journey this past year, it's amazing at the number of the credit unions that are interested in this subject. So hopefully this is relevant. We'd love to hear your feedback along the way too. So I'm just going to keep going. We're going to touch a little bit about the importance of visualization and really how it's ingrained in today's society and in ways we don't even sometimes think about. And the important thing about that is that that's the kind of stuff that your members are exposed to. So I'll talk a little bit about that. All of this obviously is with Austin. I have one slide that just does a slight comparison between data science or analytics and visualization. These things get often get confused between the two, and I have to hire a data scientist to bring in visualization, and just kind of slight difference between the two, and explain that. Then we'll talk about the landscape of what's going on, how you can actually think about either adopting that within the credit union, investing it, and what might be ways to go about it, and some of the data challenges you have. And then I like to end with the three S's of visualization, which is standardization, simplicity, and scalability. And then I've talked just a little bit about that. So that's the general theme we're going to follow. We'll move pretty quickly, but we will stop for any questions along the way. So I like this slide just because it points out the amount of data that's being gathered today. I get so many times I'll have credit unions, $50 million credit unions say, I don't know if I have enough data. You will be surprised at the amount of data you have. I mean, I know at 50,000, you have at least 4,000 to 5,000 members. If every member does, let's just say, I don't know, 7 transactions a month, that's 35,000 transactions a month. Over the course of a year, that's over 400. The volume of data is growing really, really fast. And that's just transactions. I mean, think about the times your members are logging onto your systems, and every single thing that they do with a credit union, they walk in the door, you've got a record of that. They swipe the card, you got a record of that. So a statement is generated, you got a record of that. So there's a lot of data that's being created, and that's not only financial services. I mean, every 2 days as a globe, the amount of information that we're creating, we're capturing information that we had from dawn until 2003. So what that means is that we're just going really, really fast, and that's 5 exabytes of data. I've been told that's a really, really large number. But yeah, so a ton of data, and it's getting faster and faster. By 2020, we'll have 1.7 megabytes of new information created every second for every human being on the planet. So this is not like in total, but every second we'll be creating 1.7 megabytes of information for every single human being. So we've got, what, 7 billion people on the earth? If you start doing the math again, tons of speed, the speed at which we are generating. And these are things that are being captured. And I know a lot of credit unions talk about growing and expanding to the millennial space. Well, millennials are very happy with having this data out there. They have no problems with it. I know a lot of us who've been around in an era where data wasn't as prevalent have concerns around how much of this is out there. But the generations that are to follow are very comfortable with this. So this 1.7, surprises me sometimes. But the reality is that for the newer generation, it's this is just how data is going to go. So this is the world we live in. This is the world we're going towards. And the value of data, so you start spending money on big data. A lot of times I get credit unions that will ask, well, what is the value that we see on data and big data analytics? And I can't give you an exact number because that would be a whole different conversation if I could. But the reality is that credit unions are seeing at least 55 cents on every dollar. So we are seeing a lot of, this is the average company, not only credit unions, are seeing a big return on investment. And visualization is making things come to you 30% faster. And somebody's asking me, what is that? What does 30% faster mean? Is it meaningful for me or not? And I said, well, imagine if you could, from every person that you're working on, every kind of report, every project you have, if you could get 30% more productivity out of that. I'm asking 30% more, where if you had 100 people, you actually have a staff of 130 with 30% more visualization. So it really is changing the landscape. And Austin, I know you talked to a lot of credit unions about this. What are you hearing in terms of needs for reporting or visualization in credit unions?
Yeah, I think you pretty much nailed it on the head there, where we have a lot of data coming in at us quicker than ever, and the need for visualizations is more and more important because of that. Because earlier on, it was very easy to consume a small amount of data without having a ton of visualizations aiding you in that. But now we have so much data, so many different data sources, that without being able to bring it all together and then start to quickly visualize it with nice charts, colors, and so forth, it becomes very challenging. So I'm seeing the more we progress, the more data comes at us, the more opportunities we have, and then also the greater the need for the individual credit union to get more and more involved in each one of those areas that you just touched on, Karan.
Yeah, it's funny because you're right. And the more you start providing folks, the more they want. It's almost like the tab keeps opening more and more, and there's just a demand. Credit unions want to be more data driven. This is one of the best ways, because like you said, the more you do, and the more people start using it, the more it's just a catapulting effect, or sort of speeding things up there.
Right. Yeah. Just to add to that, that's always what I recommend as the best approach. When credit unions ask me, how do I start? The answer is you start, because you don't really know what questions you want to ask yet. But as you start to get into more data and another question arises, it's kind of this ripple or domino effect where it starts to come at you faster and faster, and the demand for all that stuff from the entire organization starts to spread throughout very quickly as well. So kind of a sidebar there, but what you're seeing on the screen here now, just to kind of set the stage, is all of the different levels and steps of data and analytics that we're seeing within the industry. So all the way from the basics of just simply does your credit union have data? We know the answer to that. It's obviously yes. There's a ton of different data out there that exists within the credit unions, just at an individual credit union themselves. And then all the way up, as we work our way up this curve, we get into the more exciting but more challenging, difficult stuff, and also most valuable stuff out there, which is getting into things like predictive modeling, getting into optimization, which is really your machine learning, and then ultimately getting into things like artificial intelligence, which are really derived from these data sets that we're talking about today. So I think, one of the things that I'm driving home in this presentation today is that we need to be thinking about this entire curve, this entire journey, not just solving one tiny piece of it. I think that's one of the challenges or the struggles that we have is we get focused on doing one thing. I want to do lending analytics, or I want to do marketing analytics. I want to understand member profitability, but we start to build that use case, but we ignore everything around it. What else is coming in the future is what we need to think about, and how each one of these steps impacts the next one up, including, as Karan will mention, the visualization pieces that need to be tied into each one individually. So unfortunately, with what we've been experiencing, On Approach has been in the credit union space doing data and analytics exclusively for credit unions since 2010. I've been with the company since 2013, but unfortunately, where we see most of the credit unions is still kind of stuck in those bottom two tiers, just because it's very challenging to really get all of our data together, starting to make sense of it, and starting to organize it with that futuristic view on it. So, we can build something, but are we building it for all of these pieces versus just one quick win, for example? So that's kind of the current state. I just wanted to add that in there, and Karan, I can turn it back to you for the next slide here. Karan, are you there?
I apologize. I ended up muting myself there for a second, and I couldn't unmute myself. Madhavi has really tight controls over this webinar, that's for sure. Can you hear me now, Austin?
Yep, I can.
Okay, great. Yeah, sorry. So the next couple of slides really talk, it's talk about how much your members are exposed to this over on a day-to-day basis, and sometimes we just take it for granted. I was thinking about this the other day, and I decided to kind of draw out what my day looks like. This is obviously a little bit back, but so I start the day with a cup of coffee, and my machine is pretty sophisticated. Walk up and you can select what you want and select the amount of milk. This is all an interface. So visualization is just how you present information, allow people to make choices, data. So you start off the day with a simple cup of coffee. There it is, right? Then you say pick up the newspaper or go online and say, well, what can I find in terms of New York's 27th congressional district, right? Tells you how the Democrats are doing versus Chris Collins has a slight edge in a poll on the poll over the Democratic candidate. Well, click through further, and you can find now exactly how that has moved. So Collins got a +4 over the last, looks like over the last week or so. Constant evolution. And this is, again, this is online. This kind of stuff, with elections happening recently, you can go a step further and say exactly how is that broken out? Where do people stand based on polls? This is being presented to people. So think about it again. If you think of not only your members, but even your employees, the way information is used, this is what people are used to. So I ordered pizza for lunch. Domino's, Austin knows this because we talk about Domino's all the time and how they've been such a huge success story, going from $2 to $200 in the last 8-9 years, of a valuation of from $110 million to $11 billion, just built on the fact that they've come up with a really effective way to engage with their consumers. Almost everybody knows the pizza tracker of Domino's, where you can see things. It moves through it, and it's a very simple thing, but it gets the point across, and it's made it simple for people to order. And here's another example. At the end of the day, you look at your steps, or Fitbit has changed the way information is being passed on to consumers, and this is real time. You could walk 5 steps and look at your Fitbit, and that information has gone from the phone, from your Fitbit device to your phone. It's probably on the web at this point. It is all real time happening. And so this information, again, visualization has changed the way we view things, has changed the way we engage. with our devices. It's changed the way we also engage with our institutions. But what I haven't touched on is even how banks and financial institutions are using it to better engage. You can walk into a doctor's office nowadays, and they've got screens up there which are touch screen, and you can try to look at and read about different types of medication, different types of diseases. You walk into so I live in Northern Virginia, and you can walk into the Capital One branch, and they've made it a very interactive experience through the technology. So again, I know this isn't about how you can really engage with your members. This is about bringing visualization to the credit union, but realize that your members, your employees, every single person is seeing that kind of stuff out there in the market on a daily basis. I mean, this is an example from Bloomberg. I mean, stock data. This is the Federal Reserve, even the government or the Federal Reserve has really good visualization. I don't know if you all have ever looked at this. This bottom chart is actually the effective Fed's rate. It also shows how Fed rates were really high back in the early 80s. But, you know, it just shows, I mean, you can pull back 20 years, 30 years, 1955, what is that, almost 60 years worth of data just in a matter of a couple of clicks. And this is available for everybody to use. And this is, again, what people are using out there. So just a little bit, I was talking about, you know, I'm going to explain what data analytics is versus visualization. At CU Rise, we do a lot of data analytics as well. So this is basically looking for patterns, building underlying models and predictive modeling, descriptive modeling, all the various kinds of modeling. And we use tools like SPSS, R, Python to do these things. Visualization is basically presenting patterns graphically. So it's allowing people to be able to see things. You still, tomorrow, if you wanted to go down the path of taking these reports, build, and you know, this is sort of the first step to building that predictive analytics piece. You can, based on what you see in terms of patterns, then start saying, well, I want to be reactive to that, or I want to be proactive to it, and how you react to it. So visualization really just presents this information to you in an effective manner. There are tools around statistical standpoint or data analytical standpoint, which will actually identify unique trends there. Visualization can be interactive, can be static. Nowadays, static reporting is pretty much gone the way. Most of the stuff is interactive. Even tools, and we have a couple of slides in the bottom of the presentation that are built up SSRS, and majority of you all have SSRS already available in institutions. Most credit unions use either SSRS or Power BI, and I do talk a little bit about that, but we do have some examples around it. And some of the examples of tools I've written here, Tableau, Power BI, you know, a lot of the vendors that are providing visualization tools, that's what they focus on, whereas like SAS, R, and Python are more data analytical tools. So we'll jump a little bit into this. Austin, I'm going to pass it over to you to talk a little bit about the current state.
Okay, sure. Thanks, Karan. Yeah, so I mean, basically when you, you know, before you get into any of the visualization pieces or the data analytics pieces that Karan was just mentioning, one of the first key things is cleaning up your data. You know, as you can see in this picture here, kind of a mess of toys. That's typically what we see within a credit union, data set. You know, we come in and we see a ton of different data, but it's scattered throughout the credit union, and it's almost impossible to make sense of it. You know, especially on an enterprise-wide, 360 holistic view of what's going on. We just have too many different challenges that we struggle with. So, Karan, if you want to just advance the next slide here. So, you know, this is kind of the double-edged sword that we face as an industry. Right now, you're seeing a whole bunch of different examples of some of the data that we have, and this isn't even all of it. This is just a few key examples that we've put together here. But as you can see, we have a ton of very valuable data. The double-edged sword that I was getting at, though, is that we have so much valuable data that because of the volumes and because of the complexity and the differences in all these different data sets, it's almost so much that we can't even do anything with it. So we're gifted with having a ton of very valuable membership data, but starting to be able to use that so that we can start to ask what's next. You know, what's the next question we should be asking? How should we be using that data? How do we execute on that? How do we increase the member experience? There's a pretty long journey that has to take place before we can start to get into it. And actually, the slide kind of does it a disservice because the slide looks nice, clean, and organized, but that's not exactly what it looks like before we get into it. So what does it kind of look like today that we're seeing in most credit unions? Karan, if you want to hit the next slide here, we're seeing this very very labor-intensive manual process where we have a ton of different data that I've mentioned a couple times already, but all of that data is sitting throughout different disparate data silos. So as you can kind of see on the graphic here, if I want to ask the question like how many auto loans were approved, versus funded, it's going to take someone, this manual effort to go along from all these different databases, try and sift through the irrelevant and the relevant databases to try and gather all of that information. And then, you kind of you get this end result, but then you kind of loop back because there's so many, there's so much disorganization in the data that we can't fully automate this. So the challenges that you're seeing on the bottom, I've mentioned data silos already as one of them, but redundancy is a huge one because we're constantly having to do this again because someone asks how many auto loans were approved versus funded. Someone goes out and they figure it out. They gather the right information to do it. They put it into a nice, nice visual. But then next month we ask the same question again, and they have to go over and do that whole process, back again. And also, there's a lot of concerns with accuracy because when we're doing something in this way, there's too much manual human intervention, and anytime you have a human doing something, we're susceptible to having human error. So we're going through this process that's very manual, very repetitive, and also very error prone because of just the fact of the way we're doing it. So what you're seeing on the next slide is kind of a proposed proposed architecture. So this is what we show when we get into some of our clients. So at OnApproach, when we start to work with our clients, we want to establish the fact that this isn't just about data integration. It isn't just about predictive modeling or visualizations or anything like that. As I mentioned earlier on one of the first slides, this is something that you have to view on really a futuristic view, because we can build something that satisfies an individual use case need today, but did you build something that's scalable for the next thing that's coming? So what you're seeing here is kind of one of the a simplified process of how we take data from all these different ancillary systems. We organize it, in the M360 data model and put it into, the standardized format. But then we're also thinking about how this process is going to be impacted by everything else. So what data visualization tools are you using? What are you using them for? What predictive models do you want to tap into? What other applications, are out there? Or, when you're seeing data services, we refer to that as the process of getting data to our partners. So like CU Rise would be a great example of that. So, you need to think about all of those pieces before you go down the journey of getting it. And then, the data lake aspect is something too we can take offline and talk about it at a, different date in more context here. But that's another thing to consider is, us bringing our data together for stuff that's above and beyond what an individual credit union's doing. So, I'll turn it back to Karan here to talk a little bit more about visualizations, but I just wanted to take it a step back because I think the most exciting piece of data and analytics is the actual analytical output and the visualization that comes with it. But I think a lot of this process gets neglected because it's not as exciting. People don't really care as much about data integration because when you're done with that, all you have is a bunch of data organized in a nice, nice format. It's not the flashy reports and predictive outputs and all of those visualizations that are going to come with it. So that's really, as Karan gets into what visualization should you be looking into, you also need to think about what's the process that we need to take to get to that to that end goal that we're hoping for there.
And Austin, you bring up a good point. I remember reading at one point that the amount of effort and you're willing to put into a visualization around something, it's going to take you between 2 to 4x to build the data, organize it, and get it ready for the visualization on the back end. So just keep that in mind too as you all think about doing this. That make sure you've got at least some of the checks and balances and the structure to allow for it, and that does take time and effort. I mean, this is a really pretty slide and makes everything look with straight lines and everything. The reality is that it's similar to that previous data slide that you had, which was things are all over the place, and it takes a ton of effort to get from the boxes at the bottom to that centralized data warehouse structure on which you can build visualization. So now that's not to say that you have to all get all your systems in before you do anything, but it does take a ton of effort. So moving on, I'll talk a little bit about the tools here. The ones on the left, 3 are the ones that we see most commonly used at credit unions, and it's no particular order. SSRS is SQL Server reporting services. So this is something that most of y'all have SQL Server or some kind of SQL data warehouses. SSRS is something that's offered on top of that. It comes complimentary, so you can actually have SSRS dashboards distributed across your organization for no cost, assuming you have the right SQL Server licenses and you use it. But that's something that's very basic. It's not the most attractive tool. So when I was showing you that election chart, for example, that's not built on SSRS, but it does get, it is, you can filter down, you can drill, you can, it's not as clickable, but it does get you pretty much any and everything you want, and I'll show you a demo of that. And you don't need phenomenal skills. The skills is an interesting point too, just because, you know, there's a lot of tools, Tableau, Power BI, that'll actually go out and sort of market the solution, the product. But what credit unions oftentimes overlook is that once I get it, I still need to invest in somebody who's going to build out the reporting capabilities, the BI on top of that. So you can start off with this SSRS piece, but really to get to the point of usability, one, it's going to take that effort on the data side that we were talking about previously, but also will take some data on the back. The effort on the back end is how to use and how do you actually monetize the tool that you just bought. So, you know, like I said, the left three, Tableau, very, very flexible, very attractive, is really well integrated with R. Actually, so is Power BI, is also very well integrated with R. Tableau is good for extremely large data sets. We found that when I started looking at Power BI and Tableau, they both are pretty good tools. But you know, Tableau does, and it has some basic some basic statistical tools in there too. So you can do, for example, you can do logistic regression in Tableau. You know, if you are doing that, you can do that. I mean, so it has some of that capability. It is pricey. And then there's Power BI, which I find a lot of credit unions use. In fact, if I think about between SSRS and Power BI, probably about 80-85% of credit unions are within those two tools there. Tableau is probably the third in the line there. And so and Power BI is also good because it's inexpensive, especially that server-based license is very integrated with Azure and SQL Server. And it used to be offered as a part, so you can view Power BI reports, I think, as a part of the MS Office stack, so you can almost, without getting any extra licensing, you can actually take care of that. I mentioned ClickView and Domo because ClickView is probably, again, I'd say pretty after the top three, one of the more popular tools used out there. I've got a couple of credit unions that have ClickView, not a lot, and that's partly because of the fact that we just don't see as much, you don't get a lot of programmers who can do ClickView programming. It's more prominent, for example, in the healthcare segment, not so much in financial services. ClickView also does a little bit better in Europe than they do in America. So that's something to factor in. And Domo is an up-and-coming tool. It's been around for a few years. It's cloud-based. It's a pretty catchy and snazzy tool. But to be very frank, for the type of needs that I see credit unions, I mean, I'm not saying address your need today and reinvest in a tool for, 2 years from now, but within really from today to the next 2 to 3 or 4 years, Power BI and SSRS for the most part capture any kind of reporting you're going to need. And if you're trying to plan out for the 5-year element, just realize that who knows what tools are going to be out there at that point anyway. So for the near term, those are the tools I'd recommend. I've added R, ASP.NET, Java, and some of the ones at the bottom. These tools are more custom builds. So if you go out and buy Information Builders or MicroStrategy or some of these established players, they've built their technologies using these kind of open source codes. So these bottom ones, the R, ASP.NET, etc., are more open source. And if you've got really, really good programmers and you're really itching to do this yourself from scratch, then you can use some of these to do it. But I do recommend sticking to the top left column of this chart where you have the top 3 tools. And how do you create effective visualization? I'm going to simplify it because we've talked a lot about the tools, the data structures. But if you go back to the fundamentals of it, you got to make it something that's relatable, right? So is it delivering the right message to the right stakeholders? Do I have to click a lot of times to get certain things? How can I make this something that's completely, that reaches to the audience? The quicker the better. This is interesting just because I got to tell you, times have changed. Previously, I mean, you'd click on something or run a query and you could go to the coffee machine, have coffee, come back, and all of these things. Today, if somebody has to sit and wait 5 seconds for a report, all hell breaks loose. And that's just the reality of the situation. You do lose your users pretty quick. Anyway, again, if I have to wait 10 seconds for a report, I might wait 10 seconds, I might get up and go get that coffee still. If I do that, by the time I get back, my chain of thought is lost, and it's really disruptive. So it really should be fast. That's just the world we live in today again. And we have the servers and the tools out there to do it. I mean, these things can be done. Python, for example, is an extremely fast reporting tool. It can take millions of rows and turn it around in seconds. I mean, this is fantastic. And that's the kind of technology that's out there nowadays. Looks matter. That's again, it really does. It's got to be simple. It's got to be something that captures the key information on the top of the charts. I've got this KPI comment here, but if you can get your key performance piece indicators up there, whatever the users are making. This is also where there's more design thinking happening. You may have heard of design thinking, and that's basically role-based designs, so designs that tweak and adjust based on roles. It tweaks and adjusts based on what users are typically looking for. So if I'm normally clicking on a particular report, if I've clicked on it 3 or 4 times, or when I log in the next time, it'd be great if that report was already on the top, or that little module of the report. If I'm and to take it a step further, if I have other reports that are, because you like this, sort of the Amazon model, you often click on this report, maybe these are some of the other ones that will apply to you. And those things are happening. That's where design thinking is coming. But fundamentally, looks matter. How the way the report is presented is very, very key to the users. And again, it's not keeping it too busy. And then less is more. I mean, I've found more and more. I started off as a data analyst at Capital One, and I would look at very, very detailed Excel spreadsheets back then. Then slowly we got into visualization tools, but it was very detailed. It doesn't need to be. I mean, the key points. And nowadays with the clickability, with you being able to click through all of this, I mean, anything that becomes accessible. So you don't need to have every single thing there. I know some of these things may seem very basic, but believe it or not, the number of times you'll get a programmer or a person or visualization expert who's going to build these things out, and they're thinking purely from getting the data out there. They're not thinking about the speed. They're not thinking about less is more, looks matter. It's maybe this is what I've been asked for, this is what I want to get. So these are things that are often overlooked, and I'd obviously encourage you all to keep them in mind. I stopped at some of the visualization FAQs. We get questions from credit unions to where do I start? I want to do this. I really feel like this is we've decided to invest in visualization for 2019 or for 2018, or this is a strategic initiative of ours. We want to have better BI across the organization. Where do I start? I would normally say this is current state assessment. So figure out what are your true data needs. I mean, you don't have to embark on a hundreds of thousands or multi-million-dollar project. First, figure out what is your current state. What do you want to do? Set your goals and objectives. How are you going to see that you're getting information out to the right users? And then establish some requirements. Figure out what exactly do you hope to achieve? What are going to be some of the technical and business requirements around this? How do you decide on a tool? You have to see what skills you have in-house. So you have to see and plan for the resources, right? So make sure that, and just going back to that Tableau example, if you're going to engage with Tableau, just make sure you've got people who can program in Tableau. Some people can be trained to do it, yes, no doubt. But then are you willing to put the time and effort into the training side of it too? So just be prepared for that. Look at what your technology capabilities are. I mean, if you're an organization that has shunned technology for a long time, or have kept things relatively simple, or relied extensively on your vendors, well then, it's pick a tool that's going to be simpler. Go with something like an SSRS. If you are somebody who's your credit union is extremely savvy, then you might be willing to experiment a little bit more and maybe even go with something like, I don't know, like a Domo. I'm just kind of stretching the different options here. And then, of course, make sure it's compatibility checking. Look at what the business objectives are. If you're going to be mining through a lot of information and you plan to bring in more external sources and those kind of things is one thing. If you want to start presenting it out to a certain business group, that's another thing. And so Power BI would be great for something like that. If you want to say, okay, I want all my executives to have an executive dashboard every morning. And I want all my branch managers to have branch information. I mean, those kind of things are very easily done with things like, again, SSRS and Power BI. And how do I get the maximum from the tool? This is obviously follow the 3 S's. Make sure that, and I'll talk about the 3 S's next, so I'll skip over that point. Promote data-driven thinking. Get people, this is more of a philosophical thing too, is, getting folks to start making decisions based on data. I mean, we've seen, I'm going to do a 1.99 or 2.99 auto loan campaign early part of the year because I know people are buying cars, and it's worked for me in the past. Well, that's fine, and that's just more of a procedural thing. I've done it every year. I'm going to do it again. Well, why don't we do some analysis around? So start thinking about, divvying up the responses, looking at the campaign results from those prior campaigns. What can you do? So start promoting that kind of thought, and that'll actually start getting you a whole lot more value from the tool, because it's like anything. You can do data analysis, you can do visualization, but if you don't use it and you don't get people to actually adopt it, then it's a bit of a wasted effort. And you should ongoing review of ROI. I mean, how much you're spending on tools, how many people are using it, do some kind of measure analysis, put some numbers around it, and see the values. I mean, if you can get, going back to the original slide, if you can get that 30% lift that that institutions are getting, that's hugely powerful for you. I'm going to stop first for a glass of water. Austin, did you think of any other questions or any things that credit union should be thinking about when it comes to the visualization?
No, I think you're covering it. It sounds good.
Thank you. So the end state, if you do all these things right, we started with a picture. I know no kid's room ever looks like this, maybe for about 3 seconds. But if you can get it to the point of organizing those various data sources, understanding your data elements, starting to put, you can really change things around. You can organize the data, and you can start pulling some really good and valuable intel out of that. So I'm going to jump just into the 3 S's, because I've mentioned that a couple of times. And this is the last section we'll cover before we show some examples and wrap up a little bit. The 3 things are embracing standardization, fueling simplicity, and applying scalability. So standardization is basically using the same data across the model. So this is the one truth, for example, having a standard philosophy on reporting, reducing complexities and disparities around the data, to minimizing, organizing the data in such a way that it actually allows for more efficient reporting. On the other side, simplicity side is, can it be interpreted? I mean, can it be used? Can it be read really well? Is it customizable? Does this meet your users' needs? And is it simple? Credit unions that start with a very complex view or visualization will often fall flat in that decision making. So I would strongly recommend keeping things relatively simple. And then apply scalability. Scalability is the reality of life. I mean, like I mentioned, the previous slide with this picture, it looks really good, but we know it's going to ruffle up again. I mean, there's going to be things happening. Not only that, there will be new and different data coming in too. So is your model scalable enough to adopt more information? Does it have the right process? So this is a lot more around organizing of your data sources, processing speed, and is it something that can be, say, shared across the organization? I mean, tomorrow if you say, oh, I really like this enterprise or this senior leadership suite that I have, can I get this across the organization? That kind of stuff applies some scalability. So just kind of walking through an example is, can you organize your data from different sources? This is the standardization part. Create a single data, single truth, standardize the dashboards, and have easy user access. Creating processes around this will really help in, again, adding more and functioning more seamlessly across the organization. I have an example. This is an SSRS report, by the way. It just kind of shows a little bit about the simplicity side. We had 2 boxes, high attrition, low engagement, low attrition, high engagement. Want to see how many members fall in that. Breaks it out by products, gives you a little bit of the numbers, and then has a list at the bottom. So if you think about it, this is the report that the user sees. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections in it, 5 little graphs. They can click on anything and adjust it. But it's very simple, not a lot of information out there, but is relevant to what the user is asking for around engagement and attrition. That's what this particular picture is. And this is a relatively simple way to present it out to your users. The scalability part was adding more data sources. We get a couple more in there. What does that do to you? Is your standard data structure adjust? So it's grown a little bit, but are you built to be able to handle it? Can you add more information? Does it slow things down? Do you always have that little circle that makes you wait for things? And then can you add more users about it? So scalability is pretty key. The interesting thing, and we talked about this early in the presentation, is once you start and get people to start using it, you will be surprised. In fact, I was talking to a credit union earlier today, and they said, we had a few people, and I started providing the reporting to them because they were doing it manually, and this one person would build it for them. And he started providing the reports to this the small group within the credit union. And before he knew it, word got out that this gentleman's providing reporting capabilities. And he said, I've now had, my door doesn't close because there's people always walking and asking for information. So now it's gone from just the marketing team needing information to the lending, to the finance, to the risk. I mean, it's just all over the place. And that's what happens So are you built to handle that? Do you have the right scalability to address it? So I have a short case study, and it's a video, but I'll move through it pretty quickly. So there's a sort of dashboard that's been built. I see, right, it's a predictive model suite, and we built this in partnership with OnApproach. It's SSRS, and what it does is it allows you to basically look at your membership pretty easily, and then there's a series of boxes on the top. I'm actually going to pause the video and just talk about it. It might be easier. There's an engagement score. You can click on that, and it actually will take you into an engagement metric where you can see your members and see how they're engaged. Similarly, you can click on the attrition prediction if you see there on the left, and it'll tell you sort of where your members are in terms of attrition, how many members fall between the high, medium, and low. It breaks them out. You can click on any one of these or filter down to it, and it'll actually show you specific members within that group. Very simple, and it's all clickable. Like I said, we've kept it simple, and that's the philosophy that we follow when it comes to this. And then I'm trying to move past to the product propensity. So product propensity is a predictive model that's been built around, helps you predict what the next 2 products a particular member is interested in, be that a unsecured LOC or a auto loan account. And so you can, again, filter by any particular metric that you want around it. If you want to look at just auto loans, tell me who are the members that are interested in auto loans, you can do that. Kind of keep moving through this because I see the time. It's drillable, so you can come down here, select a particular product, fine-tune it, hit view report, and then build it out to see the report you want. This is the 3 seconds I was talking about. So people hate waiting, and so if you can find ways to speed this up, that makes a big difference in the report too. This is that original report, the simple one that I was talking about. You can see same way you can filter for any kind of attrition groups or engagement groups within this particular report. Now, I do want to point out this is all built on SSRS, and so it's really it cost the credit union nothing to have this particular report out there. We've then added engagement scores and a couple of other metrics there too. The last part we did have was around a member view, which is you can click on any member, whether they're high attrition, any member, you can type it in, and you see the member's name, ID, where they are, the amount of loan they've paid in the last 12 months, load interest, fees, what their next best products are. So we've actually had credit unions say, I don't even, the traditional form of CRM, visualization with predictive models or data science can actually eliminate the need for things like CRMs or even an MCIF, because a lot of that is captured within the reporting and presentation of that information across the organization. If you notice here on the top left, you've got this little save button right in the middle there, actually. And if you drill down, you can save this, you can export that information, you can even create automatic feeds into your marketing team or your marketing vendors to act on this information. So there's a ton of value that's being created in the form of reporting nowadays. And obviously, this is just one view of it. So just to summarize, I have 2 slides and takeaways, and then I'll let Austin add anything that he wants to on top of that. While you're looking to build out, like we said, you need to find ways, you will have to organize your information. You will have to get to that point. You'll have to, pull these sources together to get that one single source of truth. But while you're doing that, there are things that you can do along the way. And that's where this business intelligence piece comes in. So you can actually have some initial BI set up. You can actually start planning for it. You can do that current state assessment. You can start looking at existing reporting across your credit union, because that's something people already do. They already know the sources of that information, and that's something that can be pretty easily converted into sort of the first set of reports that come out. You can build a ton of new dashboards. So there is a life cycle too, because it'll take you about, if you're trying to build this yourself, if you go with an OnApproach M360 kind of solution, it's obviously really accelerated. But if you're trying to build out a data warehousing capability, it's going to take at least 2 years. And in that time, you can plan certain things. Now, if you move with something that's more built up and ready and provided in the market, well, then you can do a lot of these things sooner. And with that, you also will end up getting a lot of reporting capabilities. Austin, did you have any thoughts on this particular thing? Because I know this is an area that OA steps in pretty well.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the hit the nail on the head there. It all goes back to my earlier point about making sure that this is something that you're considering for future scalability as well. So I think a lot of people get bogged down pretty quickly by one specific use case, but what we did at OnApproach that's a little bit different is we really spent a long time developing a foundational element of data and analytics, which is the platform itself, and thinking about what's coming. So like when we first started out in credit unions, it was all about reporting, but that's not how we built our data model. We built it knowing that reporting and dashboarding and descriptive modeling is going to be important, but soon there'll be forecasting modeling demands, there'll be predictive modeling demands, machine learning, artificial intelligence. So that's really what we set our focus on doing. So I think like you said, Karan, we can OnApproach can definitely help credit unions accelerate that. But I think if you were to attempt to do it yourself, it's really think about the entire picture, not just what is being demanded today, but you really need to take a step back and think about everything that could potentially come in the future. And it's not the easiest thing to do. You're kind of trying to conceive stuff that doesn't exist yet, but it is important, because if you don't build the data foundation for the future, you're going to be constantly going back to the drawing board and redeveloping, and then starting over again, and then things are going to break, and then you're going to go back and forth into that process over and over again. So that's why we spent a huge portion of our time just on the development of the platform before we even started dabbling our feet into dashboarding and predictive modeling and so forth. So.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This is the last slide. So some of the key takeaways, I'd say, organize the data. I mean, we've talked plenty about that. It's a key part of it. If you don't spend the time up front, then it's a much longer process to do that. Review the right tool for your credit union. Just make sure you've thought through what your needs are, understand those business requirements around it, and build simple, scalable, and standard reports and dashboards. I mean, we don't have to create that election piece. We don't have to go down the Fitbit model, although the Fitbit model, since it's so graphical, it is pretty easy to understand. But the election one, for example, we don't have to do that. This is find out the key data elements that matter to that particular user group and sort of build something that's simple, scalable, and standard. Constantly find areas for improvement. This is not a one and done thing. I think a lot of times, and credit unions, and we are all notorious for this, is we think it's a one-time investment. This is it. This is an ongoing process, so just recognize that, and then take action. So, this is a great webinar. I appreciate your joining, but if there's one thing you want to take away is act on it, because you obviously had a need. And as you realize, we do a lot of work in the data science space, and we are seeing that credit unions that are more data-driven, that are spending the time and effort and around these activities, are seeing results. So, and are seeing results enough to differentiate themselves from ones that aren't. Times have changed. I mean, this is something that's critical. I think institutions do need to think and take action in order to continue to thrive. And I'll pause for questions here, Madhavi, and maybe pass the screen back to you.
Thank you, Austin and Karan. So that was really awesome. So we have a few questions from the audience. How big should be the credit union to use visualization tools? Like what can be the numbers of members, asset size, number of branches, and can a small credit union be also benefited by it?
Austin, do you want to take that? Because you all work with credit unions of all sizes too, right?
Yeah, exactly. That was the point that I was going to make. Is I think one of the things that we encountered early on when we first started working with credit unions was the perceived notion that this is only for big credit unions. Only big credit unions can partake in data and analytics, which was really one of the things that we wanted to kind of squash and build a solution that was scalable for to work effectively with small credit unions, make it easy enough for any end user of any technical expertise in order to build their own visualizations. So kind of simplifying the data piece behind that. So we actually have clients as small as 40 million in assets. So our smallest client on our enterprise platform is One Detroit, and they're just over 40 million in assets. And then our largest client is around 4-some billion in assets. So you're looking at a range from anywhere from about 7,000 members to about 400,000. So my answer in short is this is for all credit unions. I think it's just a matter of of getting that start. Like Karan and I mentioned earlier, it's it might seem like a very large, daunting task and effort, and to be fair, it somewhat is, but you're not going to know where to go next if you don't first start. So regardless if you're a small credit union or a large credit union, data analytics is an opportunity for you.
And I don't know if this is confidential or not, but it isn't. But even One Detroit, even at the size that they are, Austin, I don't know if you know this, but we're in the process of installing the predictive model suite. So at a $40 million credit union, not only do they have the data really well organized, but we're now able to, in a matter of a week and a half, install predictive models, and we're working on analytical dash. So there's a ton just by going through that data effort. They're now getting a whole lot more functionality that they ever thought they would.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So next we have how similar or different are these visualization tools from data warehouse tools?
I mean, they're completely different. So data warehousing is, we didn't get into any of the data warehousing tools, but those are the technologies that are used to organize and store, and there's a huge amount of work that goes into that, and a completely different skill set. That's where you have DBAs and those kind of roles, and ETL professionals. Visualization is about extracting that information. So that's probably the point where the data moves into the visualization side of it, but it's about presenting it in the best possible way. So one is about storing, managing, loading, all of those things. And the other side is viewing it, using it, making it compelling, and getting people excited about it. So there's two different sides to it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think one of the pieces just to mention on top of that too, though, is that I do see a lot of confusion around that just simply because we do have some data visualization tools out there that talk about data organization at a high level, and it can kind of be misunderstood where they're saying, we're a data warehouse solution, which I don't think is their intent, but a lot of times it comes off that way in the sales process. Like a good example is, a couple of our clients had purchased ClickView, and ClickView talks a lot about organizing your data, but the difference is ClickView knows nothing about credit union data and credit union data from multiple different systems and multiple different organizations. They're just simply saying that we can organize some data from a basic level, but they're not looking at it on an enterprise-wide data integration platform level, which is really kind of the key distinction point to make. Is a data warehouse for a credit union is all of your data from all of your systems, all standardized and normalized into one clean, consistent format. Data visualization tools aren't capable of doing that. They just can't handle those functions and those volumes and so forth.
Yeah, and there's another thing. Now that you mentioned the ClickView part of it, some of the tools just purely sit in your data store. They sit on the data set that you have, and they present it out. So they're constantly running against the data set. Whereas tools, and ClickView is one example where they'll create cubes, and so they'll pull and summarize some of that to make the reporting a little bit faster. And so when they make that pitch, you're right, they say that we'll organize your data, but they're just creating small subsets on top of your main data store too.
Okay, so we have another question with us. What kind and how big of a team is required at the credit union to support visualizations?
That's a good question. I think it depends on how much and how fast you want to move. I think more of the time is better spent if you're not in a data organized state, to spend in organizing the data and having a smaller focus on visualization. I think you should still do some of that because it's you can't wait and have nothing in the in the interim period. But sort of downstream, I mean, if you have a pretty organized data store, visualization and data analytics is growing really, really fast. So I think more time and effort you can do, the better your results are going to be. Now you don't have to have huge teams to do it, and there are tools and there's companies like OA and CRISE, and we can help with that. But having some of that know-how, and it goes back to one of the things I said earlier. I mean, if you buy a Tableau license, realize you're still going to have a Tableau programmer. So having nobody there is not going to work.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, I think you kind of mentioned it, Karan, but I think that's kind of a chicken and the egg question where it's really contingent on how efficient and successful of a data management solution you've put into place. Because If there's not a lot there, then the answer is you're going to have a very, very large team on your visualization end, because they're not going to be focused on data visualization. They're also going to be focused on the manual data gathering and cleanup and governance and all of that stuff that a solution like the HonorApproach M360 platform fully automizes. So or automates. So if you have that in place, then the answer is the team can be very small. You know, we have some clients, like I mentioned earlier, we have very small clients under 100 million assets. They don't have necessarily a full dedicated person, and they do have a lot of success with that structure because they're not worried about all the other pieces that come before asking the question. They're simply just asking the question and then using the tool to find that answer. So it's kind of a wide range of, you know, of how big the team will be, but you know, there's certain things to help automate processes and eliminate some of the burden. So you can focus on the exciting stuff. The true value in data and analytics is the output and effectively executing and acting on it. Like Karan said a couple slides ago, if you're not acting on it, then we're not accomplishing anything. So getting to that phase is really the most important piece. So that's what we try to do here at HonorApproach, is eliminate all of the burden that's before that process, and kind of leapfrog you into focusing just on how do we make our members' experience better, how do we price loans more effectively, what's the next best product for a member, all of that good stuff that really truly provides a ROI and value at the end of the day.
Okay, so we have one more. What is an ideal budget for visualization, and how long would it take to have a sustainable BI process in place?
Yeah, it's sort of piggybacking off the previous question in some ways, right? I mean, it just depends on the amount of effort you're going to put into it. So I don't know if there's an ideal budget, but it does depend a lot of the amount of work you have in place already. If I were to just take a very organized, say you've got your data, just take an example, say you've got a data organized in an M360 type environment. At this point, one is you're going to have certain reporting capability provided as a part of that tool. So some of that early stage reporting is probably already addressed. So it does reduce the cost substantially to you. But that said, I mean, we talked about once you have people using it, more and more people want it. So a little bit will come down to how do you want to grow that. These in the marketplace though, finding good visualization folks is not easy, and it is an expensive proposition. So I think maximizing what you can get from your partners is key, and then being very strategic about how you plan that resource. Austin, did you want to add anything to that? Because that is the last question, and I know it's up at your wheelhouse too.
No, I think you definitely cover what I was going to say, but I think the point that you made that I'll echo is that it all kind of depends again on what your approach is going to be. Are you going to partner with a company that's going to help eliminate some of these steps? Are you going to start this journey on your own, which would start you kind of at that bottom? If you remember that curve slide I showed you earlier with data access management, dashboarding, forecasting, predictions, are you going to take on that entire journey yourselves? Or are you going to augment some of those pieces, partner with one partner here, another partner there to help with that? That's all going to impact that, because the do-it-yourself, start from scratch model looks very different from in terms of data organization and data visualization, budgeting and resource and time frame than it does if you partner with a company that has done that in the past. So that would be the first question to ask, is what route are you willing to take, and then that will kind of bring the question a little bit more focused on, okay, now that we know that we're either taking on this piece or we're outsourcing that piece, what can we focus our energy on? And that will allow you to spend less time and energy doing the things that you want to focus on.
Agreed.
So great. That was an awesome discussion. Thank you, Austin and Karan, and thank you everyone for joining this session. This webinar will be soon uploaded on the Seolytics website, so you can go through it later on. And don't forget to register for our next webinar on December 19th. It will be around practical advice for your digital strategy. Thank you once again for joining. Thank you, everyone.